Driving to the Hoop Basketball Diaries. I'm Clint. Today I wanted to talk about my favorite left-handed players, right? And maybe even kind of do like a starting five type deal. Growing up playing basketball, I remember there was this kid. He was kind of short, a little chunky. Was just average looking kid, right? But he was left-handed and he used to eat us up. He played for some little team like in the county, and we would play them and he would give us like 25 points, and you would never in a million years think he could play, right? But he was pretty good. And left-handed, I remember the first time I played him, he just lit us up, and I could not figure out what was going on with that. And it dawned on me that him being left-handed is such an advantage. A lot of players try to utilize that because it throws the defender off a lot of times, especially if you're not used to guarding a left-handed person. So I remember a couple of NBA players back in the day, to mention a few that were left-handed. You got like Artis Gilmore, Willis Reed, there was a couple of centers, Bob Lanier, Bill Russell. Bill Russell, the greatest winner in team sport history, right? Probably the best left-handed, James Harden would be in that conversation. Maybe the best left-handed players ever, right? Because you could argue that either one of those are the best at their position ever, even. That's how good they were. And then, you had some power forwards. I guess Lanier kind of played power forward. Maybe he was a center sometimes. There was a couple of guys that were difficult to guard, like Michael Redd, if you remember him. A lot of people probably now don't remember him that well, but he did play relatively recently, and he was tough to stop, and he was one of those 20, 25 a game type players. Chris Mullin, if you put him in a three-point shootout right now, probably at 50-something years old, he could give any player in the NBA right now a run for their money in a three-point contest or something like that. He's just a gym rat. He was one of those guys who was stepping back there swishing threes all day, and he shot a pretty good percentage, just a pure shooter. And he was one of those guys that could give you up to 30 a game, on any given night. He was the best player, maybe. Richmond and Hardaway were right there with him on the Run TMC Golden State Warriors. Chris was the man, and he come out of New York, and you could tell he had that New York swagger, and he could play, and that's all it was to it, So you had some shooting guards that James Harden's without question the best left-handed shooting guard ever. Probably, other than maybe Jordan, maybe one of the best ever, right? So just a guy that, good Lord, that step back, and he's just one of those guys that can score 50 points whenever he wants to. And then your point guards, you had a couple of guys like Nate Archibald, and Nate Archibald has the distinction of leading the league in points per game and assists per game, which is mind-boggling if you think about it. I think he was up around 34, 35 points a game. I think 11 or 12 assists a game the year he did that, and he didn't win MVP. He lost it to, I believe that was in 73, and he lost it to another lefty by the name of Dave Cowens, a guy who, one of the best centers during that era. Probably didn't deserve the MVP that year, although Boston was way better than the Kansas City Royals, I think, or Cincinnati Royals is who Nate Archibald was playing for that year. So, if you go by the best team, then it probably was Cowens. But when you look at the stat line of Archibald that year, it was just mind-boggling to have that many points per game and that many assists per game. And to touch back, Dave Cowens is another great left-handed player. Not one of my favorites. I always felt he was kind of overrated. Kind of a hustle player. He'd give you 18 and 18. He's a strong rebounder. A little undersized, about 6'8", 6'9", and he kind of had some personal problems from what I understand, so that maybe shortened his career a little bit. He did play with Larry Bird his last year, and they actually were really good that year. Bird come in winning Rookie of the Year, and Dave Cowens was still, you know, a 15 and 12 kind of player and effective, and then he just retired out of nowhere after only about 10 years in the NBA. So going back to some other centers at that time, Willis Reed, I mentioned earlier, with the famous, you know, Willis Reed gets them going. I think that was in 1970 against the Lakers, and he was hurt, and he comes out and he knocks his first 2 jumpers down, and that was the only shots he made in that game, but he got the Knicks going. You know, that's that intangible that players or people talk about, and he definitely had the intangibles as a leader. Anyway, just a couple of players there. I liked Artis Gilmore. I mentioned him earlier too. Probably behind Shaq and Wilt, probably the strongest player ever. Like, I mean, he would just ragdoll the guys out there. There was a couple other strong players that were surprisingly stout, you know, like Terry Cummings, but he wasn't a lefty. But Artis Gilmore was up there with the strength department, and he shot such a great field goal percentage. For the longest, he had the career field goal percentage, the highest field goal percentage of all time. But I think it's been broken and then unbroken, so I don't know where he stands at this point. But he was up there. He was a good one, and I know he gave Kareem a run for his money anytime they matched up. Same size, except for Artis probably outweighed Kareem by 25, 30 pounds. And there's some video clips. If you go on YouTube, you can see the strength of Artis Gilmore. Ralph Sampson, I think, talks about it maybe too in his Hall of Fame induction. Off the top of my head, you know, that's a couple of left-handed players that I always admired that could really get it done. And anyway, just hope you guys have a good holiday season, and I hope to see some comments below talking about some of your favorite left-handed players. If I'm going to start a team of all left-handed players, it's definitely going to be Bill Russell at center. My power forward, I'm going to go with Bob Lanier. My small forward, ooh, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'd have to come back on that one. And then my shooting guard, James Harden, and my point guard, Nate Archibald. Man, the small forward position, that one's tough. I'm probably going to have to go, I was thinking Sidney Moncrief was left-handed, but I could be wrong about that. So I'm just going to go with Chris Mullin, just because he could score and shoot so well. If you had a starting 5 guys that you needed someone to spread the floor, Mullin's going to spread that floor. So is Harden. Archibald's going to get the dishes right, and he's going to score when he can. He's one of the quickest players ever. Bob Lanier, Bigfoot, right? Just a strong guy that you didn't play around with, and he didn't take no BS off anybody. And then lastly, of course, Russell. If I was going to have a couple of extras, you know, Willis Reed would be a good center, and Artis Gilmore as a backup, but definitely Bill Russell, you know, with his success and his statistics as well. That's who I'd go with. Love to see your guys' top 5, or excuse me, your starting 5 left-handed players, and just some of your favorites too. Go ahead and like this video if you don't mind, and I hope you subscribe. Have a good holidays, and we'll see you soon.